Hey everyone, this is Out of Order. My name is Ben Mayer.
My name is Anthony Buono.
And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany and his visit to China that just happened this past week. So we love to talk about foreign countries.
We do.
China is probably at the top of the list because China is the second biggest country by economy and by population in the world. But Germany is the third biggest population. We've talked about the German, not only economy, but the German political sphere from a lot of different angles.
We've actually accumulated a little bit of a German audience, which I think is so funny.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It is cool. And it's, so now to the German-Chinese relationship, and honestly the German-American relationship, is very interesting on a macro level. So Scholz going to China, he has a lot of different things that he has to talk about and that he did bring up with Chairman Xi when they met there. One of those was promoting the interest of German companies operating there. So since Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Germany's executive actions to cut off their imports of Russian gas and oil, inflation spiked. And it was especially hard to operate in Germany for some of their biggest manufacturing companies, which have kind of defined their economy for the past decades.
Yeah, sure.
And so now a lot of those companies went to China, which coincidentally is a big benefactor of the Russian oil and gas that had to go somewhere else after it was cut off from the Eurozone. But German companies have reported unfair treatment there. A recent survey showed that a majority of them feel that Chinese companies have better access to government officials and are more likely to get permits. So Scholz had to go there and he had to be like, hey, we need better treatment from these for these German companies. He also went with executives from, I think it was Mercedes and BMW and BASF, one of the biggest chemical producers there. So he had to advocate for German companies in that way, but at the same time, he had to warn against dumping of Chinese goods on the European market. And this has been a big theme in Euro-Chinese relationships for the past few months now, where the European market is being flooded with Chinese solar panels, Chinese cars, Chinese machinery equipment. And not only is it hurting European manufacturers as a whole, it's specifically competing with German manufacturers.
Yeah.
And they're very competitive on price. So Scholz had to go there and be like, hey, you need to stop subsidizing the hell out of these industries and these companies and make sure that we're operating on fair playing ground here, because German companies cannot compete with Chinese companies that are basically making these technologies for free because they're being subsidized by the Chinese government. She, of course, countered by saying that it's China's technological and manufacturing prowess that makes its goods cheaper. I think China wants the influence of flooding the European market with cheap goods.
Oh, for sure.
It wants to hook them.
It wants to hook them on the drug that America was hooked on for so long.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what's happening now is because America is decoupling in a lot of ways from China, China needs a new dumping ground of its products.
Totally.
And it's hoping that Europe could be that dumping ground that America was for the 2000s and 2010s.
Yeah, definitely. And they're hoping too that this can kind of drive a wedge between the US and the EU, because if they have to pose different ideologies about world trade and Germany is hooked, and the rest of the EU is hooked on the Chinese goods, then that's going to kind of put space in the US-EU relationship. Yeah,
if any way that China can disentangle the European economic future from the American economic future, they're going to take that.
Exactly.
And the Chinese have been able to get really good political influence this way too. Mm-hmm. They've done a lot in influencing Greek politics, in Portuguese politics, and they've done a lot to get good EU regulation that's beneficial for Chinese companies through influencing these countries in that way.
Yes.
And so now they're trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, with Germany. Germany, of course, is the most powerful country in the EU, and it's also uniquely dependent on China. It exports a large share of its goods there. It's like the 5th largest export destination for Germany. So it's a really important market for German manufacturers. But it also has several industries where more than half of the inputs come from China. So China is a hugely important supplier as well as a buyer of German goods.
Right.
So like the result of this is, even though Germany keeps putting out this rhetoric that like we have to de-risk, Germany, like everyone in the media kind of points at them and they're like, look at you being caught with your pants down with Russia, right? You guys trusted Russia and you kept buying their gas and you got hooked on that. And you got completely screwed by it. And now Germany is like, oh yeah, we know, and we're not going to let the same thing happen with China, but they're just continuing to let the same thing happen with China.
They're just letting it happen again with China.
So, but they can't. They're stuck.
They can't
stuck. Do anything. They don't know where to go, especially when you have the American market, which is the only other place really to turn, which is becoming protectionist in and of itself, right? So they can't find a really willing customer, a buyer in America, which would be the most significant place to go.
Sure.
And that's making them still try to play this, like try to toe this middle line with China. Meanwhile, the way I see it is China has all the power.
All of
here,
it.
Right? Like Germany is a big economy, but it's not so much bigger than France and Italy and the other European economies and Japan. So it needs Germany so much less than Germany needs them.
Yeah.
The last thing that they talked about is working towards peace in Ukraine, but this is where I think you can almost put the period on how Germany needs China so much, because the reports say that Scholz was very non-confrontational, despite recent reports that Chinese manufacturing is helping fuel the Russian war effort. It's helping them build tanks and drones, but Scholz didn't want to push them on any specifics. He didn't say anything about these reports and try to make sure that they supply the Russian war effort with less of their goods. So it's an interesting place to be, right?
Yeah.
Where he's caught between these two sides. He's trying to keep distance, but he can't distance himself that much. We'll see how it goes.
It truly feels like, I mean, Germany has lost a lot of its political power over the last decade, for sure, because of its like graying out of its economy. It's just not as strong as it was in 2009, 2010. It doesn't have that same prowess anymore.
No.
And because of that, he kind of has to go on his knees and beg China for assistance. And let's go into the political situation of Germany. This is not good for the ruling coalition. The SPD, the Greens, and the FDP, they're not going to be able to win the next upcoming election with this type of groveling and this poor international feeling towards them. It's not going to work for them.
No.
The people of the country are going to look for someone stronger, look for someone who's going to bring about a more prosperous economy, and they're going to try to look for the extremes to get that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I will say, though, the AfD has been on a decline recently, which is good to see.
Yes, that is good.
Yeah.
And if you, again, we've talked about Germany a lot. So if you want more info about not only their political situation, but we did a deep dive on their economy, check out our channel. Look into that.
That's one of our best episodes, the deep dive of the German economy post-World War II.
Yeah.
Into the Cold War and everything. Really good.
I love that one.
Thank you for watching this episode of Out of Order.
Crazy that you made it to the end.
If you enjoyed the content, please subscribe on YouTube and check us out on Patreon.
Yep. Link is in the description of our YouTube channel, and we're super poor, so we could use any support you can give.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys.